Good morning to you, Janse, and thank you so much for your time. Just give us the context, the genesis of where this particular concern comes from Agri SA regarding water regulation.
Cindy, yes, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in your show this morning. Essentially, these draft regulations, if they get promulgated ultimately, will take away the lawful ability of a number of commercial farmers, irrigation farmers in particular. It'll take away their ability to lawfully use water by prescribing black shareholders shareholding ownership for applicants for such water use license to the tune of either 25, 50 or 75%, depending on the volume of water used.
So is it an issue around transformation, and especially with the sector maybe being reluctant, or are you being apprehensive about the black shareholding? What is it really about?
The National Water Act was at the time when it was promulgated in 1998. That's post the democratic dispensation in South Africa. It was radical at the time because it specifically says that water belongs to all people in South Africa. The state is custodian, but it's not the owner. It's the custodian of that water resources. And it's very prescriptive as to how water uses might be exercised. One of the mechanisms is water use licensing, but it also had a traditional provision or transitional provision saying that people who lawfully used water prior to the commencement of the Act, immediately prior to the commencement of the Act, could continue doing so until such time as the government asks for such water uses to be licensed. And this is what these regulations are now foreseeing. We know that compulsory licensing is going to happen. We know that most farmers in the country use water by virtue of their existing lawful water rights. To carry on, or to take the point further, the specific requirement as to what needs to be considered when Department of Water and Sanitation is going to be issuing a water use license includes a number of factors, including the existing lawful water uses, including current and future investment made by water users, the beneficial use of the water, and this is a particularly important one, and the social impact of it. But the beneficial water use in South Africa is very much relied upon by the agricultural sector to ensure food security. Now, what government is saying now is that and one last point is the requirement to address social injustices and gender-based and racial discrimination of the past also needs to be considered by the department when granting a water use license. So that's implicit already. What government is now saying, and taking it much further, is saying, look, the racial and gender discrimination redress needs to be elevated to the number one requirement when when the department is going to be issuing a water use license, to the tune, as you've also said, of up to 75% black shareholding for applicants for water use licenses. Now, that's going to take away the lawful ability of a number of commercial agricultural irrigation farmers in the country to lawfully use water. If they're going to have to apply for a water use license and they're going to have to transfer up to 75% of their shares to within their farming businesses to be able to obtain that license, it's going to put them out of business at this stage if it's so radical. There needs to be a much more gradual transformation and address of the racial and gender inequalities and or discriminatory practices of the past in this licensing application, which, as I said, is already needs to take into account a range of factors to come to a balanced decision.
All right, but by definition, broad-based black economic empowerment, the definition of black has now been extended to qualifying Indian, colored, and you can correct me, eligible Chinese and African, or black like me, as it were. So it's not just Africans that we're talking about, it's in the broader definition of BEE.
Correct. Interestingly enough, it talks as an aside about women. So it's black people, and black is understood to mean exactly that term as the term is defined in terms of broad black economic empowerment legislation. But in these specific regulations, curiously, it also says that once you've dealt with applications by black people, you could also assist women, which is quite peculiar.
You can assist women as well. But I'm just saying, if the law is promulgated as it stands, and maybe you can talk to us in terms of Agri SA or any other interest groups, what it is that you're going to put forward to ensure that there is food security, as you're saying, but also the redress of past injustices, because this is a reality that we have to face to make sure that we all benefit from the wealth of the nation. So speak to us around food security and what you'll do to at least strike that balance.
Indeed, and there are many plans and initiatives ongoing at this very moment. We know that there are employment equity amendment bills and sectoral targets that have been determined. There are agreements between the commercial agricultural sector and the Department of Agriculture, as well as with the Department of Labour. Submissions and ongoing discussions on this are taking place. And what we are saying is that government needs to take a holistic and integrated approach in this and cannot simply peg transformation imperatives against targets. So gradual implementation, realistic implementation that is actually going to benefit black people, women previously discriminated against, to be able to achieve that transition. And remember, we're almost 30 years down the line as far as a democratic or post-democratic dispensation in South Africa is concerned. We should have been there a long time ago. But government needs to be very realistic about this. The sector is unique. It has a specific history, but it's also strategically vitally important as far as providing food security to this country and to this region. By the way, we're the only country in the African continent that can claim to be food secure. And we're also one of the driest countries. So this is also why the importance of water and the ability to use water is so delicate and so important to handle correctly. So to come directly to your point, these initiatives are ongoing. They've been ongoing for a number of years. They're not new in South Africa. But you can't be radical as the Department of Water and Sanitation has been with these proposed regulations by simply saying overnight you're going to have 75% black shareholding of a farm, which might have been in a commercial white farmer, let's say what it is, for generations, by simply saying you're going to have now have 75% black shareholding to be able to lawfully use water. That's simply not on. There needs to be a far more systematic, gradual approach with all relevant considerations taken into account. And also simply just knowing that you can't just enforce a one-size-fits-all approach. We've gone through this process over the last decade and more to be able to convince government that this is not the approach to take when it comes to achieving transformation requirements, which we absolutely acknowledge are vitally important.
No, thank you very much for your time. It's really a critical matter that you bring up, especially when it comes to food security and ensuring that legislation that is implemented is done so systematically, fairly, and for the benefit of all. Thank you so much. We're speaking to Janse Rabie. He's the Legal and Policy Executive at Agri SA.